Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and for some of you, you've heard me do this before. I'm quite honored that you would ask me to do this again. It's an interesting time for Rotary, and never probably been a more challenging time for a couple of reasons. The interest in Rotary remains strong. The membership issue is also one that we need to keep an eye on all the time. I'm going to first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about this presentation. It was originally developed in Minnesota, and for parts of it for a group of churches that were experiencing the same kind of issues that Rotary is experiencing now, in that they had sort of lost their way a little bit, and they were concerned about the waning membership. And it was adapted by my colleague in District 7080, Adrian DeCou, who has been a mentor of mine. So this is where this is all developed, and Adrian and I have been working with this now for probably the last 5 or 6 years. So tonight I thought we could talk about, I'm trying to do this, I got a real sensitive mouse for some reason. Hang on a second, here we go. All right, I think we're good now. Tonight I thought we could talk about the learning objectives for this, for the next little session is try to understand why clubs succeed and remain healthy, or sometimes fail. We'll analyze the vitality of clubs based on dimensions of what I see as a life cycle model of clubs. And lastly, maybe get us thinking a little bit about a plan of action or a strategy for maintaining and improving the district's long-term health, if that works for you. Here we go. Now we're working properly. So I guess the answer to this is yes. I mean, these are rhetorical questions. We all have attraction. Maybe we don't have a lot of problem attracting. We have a lot of trouble keeping members, so we lose them after just a short while. And we have trouble getting the new members who may have joined for the wrong reasons really engaged in new and current projects. And a lot of times clubs have difficulty in answering the question, what is the direction and what is your club all about? What does it stand for? And often go into a lengthy description about what Rotary International is. Some clubs have a lot of issues with a lot of projects, too many projects that have been around a long time, and end up with people get burned out as they focus on the projects that they're doing. So these are all small little issues that affect all clubs, and not just the clubs in 7820, but in districts right around the Rotary world. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit, I thought, about developing vibrant clubs, and I would ask each of you, I don't know that anyone's muted, I just want you to think for a moment about what you think the greatest issue is facing your district's clubs today, and if you could open that, or maybe I can do that, unmute people and get a little bit of input from you. Maybe we could have sort of a two-word answer as we go around the table. Is that possible to make that happen? Wendy?
Yes. Yep. I would say the biggest issue facing our clubs today is clubs wanting to remain traditional in how they go about doing Rotary. So it's sometimes, especially with some of the older clubs, older in terms of the age of the club, sometimes it's hard to convince them to embrace change. And I think to survive, Rotary needs to embrace change.
David? I see you there. Garth, are you on? You're unmuted there now.
I would say that one of the big issues is involving new members newer, younger members into Rotary, getting them to share their ideas of how Rotary can serve their community and listening to what they have to say.
Okay, I hear that's a good one. Well, interesting that you should mention those things. And the number one issue, of course, is the number one symptom that a lot of people answer is they say that the reason why the number one problem is membership, and membership really, and all those things are really just the symptom of what our big issue is now in Rotary. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I want to ask another question of you, and I want you to think a little bit about this too. But why did you join Rotary to begin with? Why do people join Rotary? And you don't have to answer this out loud. And once you think about those reasons that you joined Rotary, if you could think about why do you belong to Rotary now? In other words, is the reason why you're in Rotary today, is it different from why you joined to begin with? And I think most of us can answer that yes, it is indeed. Because the longer you're in the organization, you join for a specific reason, and you get to know a little more about the organization, but there are a number of other factors that come into play. As you start to interact with people, fellowship becomes a little more important, or as you become more and more impassioned with the projects that Rotary clubs do, you become, they drive your interest in the organization. So I thought what we could do today is talk a little bit about what happens as people do move along their Rotary life, and talk about the four elements of club vitality and what really indicates what or the indicators are of a vital club. Number one is, of course, vision, and clubs end up with they have a vision of what they want to do. Slowly relationships develop as people get together and share that vision and look for ways to realize their vision. In order to finance and to make their dreams come true, you need some money and you need some projects. And so clubs do get involved in projects, and sooner or later leadership and style and form take place and take over, and that's how clubs really thrive, when they have all those four things going, and you need all those four things. So let's take a look at those things in a different way, and if we can talk about, as you can see across the top of the screen here, I'm going to just use letters to indicate what those four elements are, and we'll have a little bit of a continuum, a time continuum. On the left here, we'll talk about the general health of the club, and we'll just go and what happens over time. So as clubs start to get together, this is your traditional bell curve, and I mean it could peak here, it could peak over on the other side. As we start to move on the health club, people get together with a strong vision in mind. And if you think about some clubs, those of you that are in clubs that are relatively new, that have been charter members, and people all have a firm commitment to, probably most of you, when I asked you why you joined Rotary, was to serve your community, and had a pretty idea of what the club was all about. If you asked a lot of new members at that time, when you were all in the same situation, you could all probably pretty well identify what the club was all about. And then you all share this vision of what it is you want to do, and relationships come into play, and you sit and talk and agree with each other on how you might attain that vision and get to that. And again, as I said, the projects start to take place, and that's kind of those are interesting things that bind a club and make a club very viable in a community. And then sooner or later, there's a management part that takes place. There's form. There's a process that comes in, and it allows you to do these things, without more instinctively than before. And good managers are people that management people. And a good management system is one that allows, that keeps a good focus on the vision, maintains a high level of relationships, and make sure that your projects are fresh and full of all kinds of excitement. But then what happens was, and this is probably the ideal situation, this is where clubs are really working at their best, but the first thing that seems to disappear in most clubs and most organizations is that people kind of forget about the vision. They, they work so hard on that big projects, and that's what consumes them all. Their meetings all of a sudden become consumed by who's gonna sell the tickets and who's gonna get them printed and who's gonna do the organization and who's gonna do all those tasks, and the conversation becomes about the activities that we do, and sort of the vision is kind of taken for granted. And the same thing happens and then as that happens, then sometimes the people that are running, and the biggest reason actually why a lot of people leave Rotary over the years is because of some sort of conflict. Somebody becomes not happy with the way things are going. They don't really express their feelings at a meeting, but they just sort of walk away and find better things to do. And so what's left is once you have those two things, and once people start to lose their faith in the projects, then the management and then the system, it really takes over. And we just sort of we go to meetings because, well, that's what we always do. The process is there, that leadership says we have to have a president, we have to have meetings, we have to do the four-way test, we have to sing the "Oh Canada," we have to do those things, and so that's sort of the style, the process, that sort of management process that takes over the meetings sooner or later. And it happens right across the board. So if you think about that on club vitality, where do you think your club is on this continuum now? And as I explained what those four areas are, where do you think you exist there? I don't know whether you can see your area, and if you can remember what those numbers are. And where you think your club or clubs are, why do you think they're there? And why do you think they've got there? And I guess the answer to that is, for most people, is we lose our vision. We seem to have lost track of why we go to meetings, the why of Rotary, what gets us out of bed in the morning. And all those other things have taken over the management, the projects, and the relationships. See, because why vision is so important. Vision is what brings us passion and direction and goals and leadership and core values, a sense of why we're here, and it motivates us to do these things. And that's what really drives the club. And of course, the opposite of all these things, without that vision, what happens to some clubs, and as they get into decay, the members start to perish. And they're going through the paces and they find better things to do. Direction kind of slips away a little bit, and they don't have a reason for doing things. There's no stress because management and the system looks after everything, and if you don't show up for a meeting, that's okay. Somebody's going to send you a newsletter and you're going to find out what happened. And you get kind of comfortable in the club. There's no real reason. Things get really smooth and predictable. You know who's going to show up. You know what everyone's going to say. You know what the challenges are and the obstacles that you're going to encounter with your projects. And as you become more and more focused on that, and if you forget about the reason why you're doing those things, it's easier for you to focus on those things. So basically your club is in a death spiral. So I like to compare this to, imagine these four people, your V and your R and your P and your M, they go for a drive in a car. And sooner or later, as they're driving along and having a good time and all chatting about the countryside and the destination, all that stuff, the vision, which was driving the car, sort of says, you know what, I've been driving this car for a long time. I'm going to get in the back seat and have a nap. And sooner or later, they start arguing about, people start in the car talking about maybe going too fast or or you missed that turn, or and the relationships start to get a little bit challenged in that. And basically what happens at the end of the day, that whole management takes over, and management just says, don't worry about it, you guys go to sleep, I'm looking after everything for you. It's all done. And that's what I mean, there's a certain comfort level that sort of takes over. And when that happens though, and as you go down on that first turn, and I suspect a number of you sort of said, well, I think our club is somewhere in this area. And so as, and when, you know, we've lost our vision, and that's the one element that seems to be gone. And when you get there, I think you can agree with me that it all's not lost. What you have to do is you have to go back and find a vision and reclaim your vision. And if you do that, then things are fine. But quite often, when that vision goes and you've lost that reason for being, you know, sometimes the relationships get a little bit strained because you're doing it based on the strength and the power of individual members. And when you get into this spot, you know, it gets a little more difficult, doesn't it, to right the ship. But you can still do that. You can do that if you're aware that that's part of one of the elements that you need to work at, if you can isolate those two elements. But then when you get down here and you just got a bunch of managers, and those are the smaller clubs that have had the same secretary for a dozen years and the same treasurer for a dozen years, and the president's probably on their second or third term, and it's the management that's keeping and holding the clubs together. And I think probably each one of us can think of a scenario where that takes place. So the big thing is where do we start? Where does this all sort of begin? And how do you rebuild this vibrant club? And I think the number one thing we can do, and this is not just me, this vibrant club talking, this is a very formal Rotary program that is available through Rotary.org. And I guess the first thing is go back and redevelop a vision and some long-term goals. You know, it's pretty interesting. I did a little bit of a study in my old district, and we took a look at membership numbers over the years, and it's really interesting. There's a really strong correlation with clubs that have goals and have a vision and a strategic plan, and the growth of membership and the vitality of that club. It's not real rocket science, and they stand out. And I suspect if you did the same thing across your district, you'd find the same information. And once you do that, I think it's important that part of this whole planning project, our process is that based on that vision of what you want to attain, you set some annual goals. And it's a process that every club should sit down and think about and go through. Because you cannot manage an organization anecdotally. You can't do it based on what you think might happen or trust that somebody else is going to do that. I think you have to map that out. I think you have to have a little bit of a process involved in doing that. Important thing in clubs and planning, and to write into your plan as you move forward, is to make sure that you do it in a transparent and an open way, so you keep all members involved in the informed and involved in the process. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a jumpy nose here. Now, so you maintain a high level of communication between all the club members and all the district people who are there as a resource. I think all of us tonight on this call are resources to the organization. The interesting challenge that most clubs face is, and it never fails to amaze me, that for some reason people don't realize they need a new president until November or December of the year before they have a president. And you know, this goes on year after year after year. and it becomes the process changes from who do we have in our club that we can develop to lead our club and get us to where we want to go. It changes from that to who can we get to do this, and it becomes an act in desperation at the end, and it becomes a plea to your members of who wants to do what is perceived as a big job instead of having the passion and ownership in trying to guide the club along the plan. I'm really amazed. I'm always amazed at how many clubs and I just spoke at a pet session in Cambridge, Ontario, and I asked the crowd of the 50 incoming presidents there, how many of them had read their club bylaws? And 3 people put up their hands. And I suspect it wouldn't be altogether different in a lot of other jurisdictions. And what the club bylaws are indeed what our club is all about and how we run the club and how the club functions. And I would think that if I was going to run an organization or a corporation or anything, that I would want to have a pretty good idea of what my bylaws say that I can and can't do and what we're all about, and to make sure that they're all up to date and current and they reflect the organization today, not when some of these were written 40 or 50 years ago. One of the more important things in this whole planning process and developing a vibrant club as well is to make sure that there are regular fellowship opportunities and that you maintain, because that number 2 element was just so important, that relationships. So once you have a vision, strong relationships help maintain that vision. So, and engagement and making sure everybody has a job and they're felt that they're wanted and they felt that they're needed in that. And these are all things that should be incorporated into a plan. These are things that you can probably, once you get all together, you might want to look back and say, does our club structure really reflect what it is we want to do? And you know, there's nothing wrong with changing the structure of your club. Indeed, Rotary International now, and I've just come back from Evanston, the headquarters, and where we had a morning session with one of the senior staff members there, where the Rotary is revisiting their strategic plan, and we were told that Rotary in 2 years, made from a top-down management perspective, may not look the way it looks today. We may not be structured properly to bring Rotary into the next 100 years. It may well, does it really work to have a district governor every 4 years? And the timelines that they've told us that are going to happen is they will have a vision statement and formulate a strategic plan by the end of this year, the board of directors of Rotary International, and it's going to make some significant changes. They're going to revisit the structure of the organization. There are over 200 standing committees in Rotary, and that's way too many to make it work and moving forward for us to exhibit any level of flexibility in the organization. And there's a pretty good chance as well that by the year, well, maybe by the end of this year, we're not going to have a #1 cause. Polio may be done. Polio maybe, there's only been 3 cases so far this year, and now we're going to need to have a strong resolve to make sure we get to certification in a couple of years, but in 2 or 3 years down the line, we have to have a strong vision in place to maintain our raison d'etre as an organization. So, and as I said, history also tells us and tells Rotary that about that. It screams actually the direct correlation between the positive membership numbers, the vibrancy of the clubs, and those that do take a serious planned process and recognize those 4 key vital areas in the club. So what would be the action plan? What is it that we want to achieve here? And I think the first thing we can do, and it's something that I think you're well on your way to doing right now, and that is to have a strong district resources, a resource that that really works and speaks to the clubs as a resource and helps them head in the proper direction. I know what we're doing here in New Brunswick and what's going on in Ontario right now is that is we're trying to bring that level of organization down to the club level. Of the 50 clubs, and I'm probably not telling tales, well, I am telling tales out of school here. Of the 40 clubs that are in the district here, there are only 11 registered membership chairs on the Rotary clubs in the district. And ask yourself in your district how many membership chairs or membership committees there are in Rotary clubs in your district. And an even more telling tale, those that might have the name of somebody on the club directory or the district directory as the membership chair, how many of them actually have a committee and a plan of action to make things happen? So I think probably the first thing that we can do as Rotary leaders and Rotary resource persons is to make sure that we at least have, that people understand that there is a process that needs to happen. And once you have that committee and start asking the questions about really what's our vision and why are we here and why are we doing this thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about today's Rotary challenges if I can for just a couple of minutes now. You see, Rotary has never had a problem attracting members. I suspect that most of the communities that you live in, I know it holds true in most of the ones I've lived in, that there are probably more former Rotarians living in the community than there are Rotarians, active Rotarians. And what does that say? What that says, the message it says that comes through to me loud and clear is that we have somehow added value to their lives. You see, people don't join Rotary, they join clubs. And if you ask those people that are no longer Rotarians, they all have something good to say about Rotary. You know, they say that, boy, those Rotarians, they do good things. It just wasn't for me, or I had other priorities, which is really another way of saying I wasn't impassioned when I got in there. So I think probably the first message that we as resources who are concerned with our membership and building a strong membership is that we have to be conscious and ask ourselves the question, are we providing value to our members? Are we giving them a good reason for coming to our club meetings? What else can they do for that hour to an hour and a half once a week when they come in? Are they taken for granted? I went to a club meeting yesterday where nobody knew me, and I stood by the door for almost 5 minutes before somebody approached me and said, "Oh, are you a visiting Rotarian?" And I wonder how people feel. And I was sort of playing the devil's advocate there too, because I wanted to see how long that was going to happen. And somebody came over and eventually shook my hand and took my money and walked away, and I was left to find a seat by myself. And how often do we do those little things, and what kind of body language does that give off? And secondly, I think we've got to ask ourselves then, does our product, and that's the club experience, and that's really, if you think about it, that's what differentiates us from everybody else, from all of the other organizations and the NGOs, and they've got great projects as we have as well. But what we can really offer our customers, who really are the members, is that club experience. You know, is our product, is it worthy of an hour and a half of their time and probably even longer commitment than what we're asking them for? So those I see are the challenges. And you know how I know that these are the challenges? It's pretty obvious, because the marketplace doesn't lie. The marketplace, well, here I'm jumping here, the marketplace tells us that people don't want to come to our meetings. That it's hard to keep them there. So we can always look back and we can, well, I can't get that, stay on the screen. We can always look back and say, yeah, we're doing all the right things, and the people don't, I don't know why they don't come to us. Well, there's a reason. And the reason is they're, and the indicator of that is they're not there. So it doesn't lie. And if there's one bit of learning that I've taken away from all of the Rotary involvement that I've had with membership committees, is that little bit that we've got to look at that fact that the marketplace doesn't lie. It's sending us a message and we're not listening to the message. You know, most people, when I ask what the issues are in Rotary, they say it's membership. Membership is really just an indicator, is a symptom of our greater problem. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to do here before I take some questions, and if you give, is to start with this. And we need to sit down, and it's a slow process. We need to first analyze what the issues are, and I think you'll probably very quickly understand which one of those 4 vital signs are missing in the club. This is a great document, and it takes you through, first of all, the club experience, and there's all kinds of opportunities. Yeah, and so there's all kinds of areas that you can talk about, and when we talk to clubs, is we can examine the problem areas and the concerns, and can help the clubs realize for themselves where the issues might be. See, the most difficult thing is nobody can fix this problem for the clubs. The clubs have to do it themselves. Change has to come from within the clubs. So the challenge the challenges that we face as resources to the organization is just that, is to understand that they are, they hold the answers to all of these problems. So anyway, I would ask you to just take a look at this document if you haven't done this. It's very thorough. There are some great resources that are available. And to go through them and have a conversation within the club, hold a club, help clubs have a talk to themselves and through club assemblies, and to deal with those elements, not deal with the symptoms, deal with the concerns and the true concerns that they are.